When talking about GoldenEye in this day and age, people either remember it very fondly, or they talk about how poorly it has aged. As somebody who's got as far as the control center on 00 Agent difficulty on original hardware, I unfortunately had to say that I definitely belong in the later category. I fully understand the historical context of the game's release and how revolutionary it was for the industry, and the multiplayer is still fun to this day, but when it comes to actually playing the single player in its original form, it's all fun and games until the horrible frame rate in tandem with the dated control scheme just double teams your ass until you just decide to stop. And I have to admit that eventually I did give up trying to beat the original version on original hardware. I see kids today complain about Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time saying that they can't control it, and honest to God, I don't understand that. With GoldenEye, however, I do understand. This game does not feel good to play under standard circumstances, despite my best efforts. If any game could benefit from a remaster, it was GoldenEye. The game, in spite of its technical issues, still had a lot going for it, and a fresh coat of paint could make it the masterpiece people believed it to be when it first came out. So naturally, they did make a remaster for the Xbox 360, and they did give it a fresh coat of paint. But unfortunately, the game was never released due to complications with the licensing. Remember, GoldenEye is part of the 007 film franchise, which is owned by MGM. The original game was made for a Nintendo console. It was made by Rareware, who is now owned by Microsoft, who are trying to remake the game for Microsoft's Xbox 360. Now, I'm not a copyright lawyer, but that's a goddamn predicament right there. So, long story short, they couldn't release it, so they were just sitting on this game that was largely completed and could never release because it was in licensing hell. What a tragedy. But as of a few days ago, the ROM was leaked, so that's pretty exciting. I don't know what's going on with all these beta leaks these days. We've been seeing all kinds of shit rise to the surface. Is it all just a coincidence? I couldn't say, but I'm all here for it. Maybe we can get that 60% completed Mother 64 ROM one day. The goal of a remaster is to make the game as good as you remember it before it fell victim to age, and graphically, that is very true of this remaster. The visuals were given a massive overhaul. I'm talking new character models with more than 10 polygons, maps with a ton of more detail, HD resolution, 60 FPS, and super upgraded textures. It truly does look great, especially considering it's from over 10 years ago. And if for whatever reason you don't like the new graphics, you can hit the right bumper and it'll swap back to the old graphics on a dime. I think this was a feature on one of the Halo collections, but I'm not sure. I do wish they included the uncompressed music now that they aren't bound by cartridge limitations, but it still sounds pretty great, so I guess I'll live. But you'll notice pretty quickly that under this fresh coat of paint, the game is still, for the most part, that crunchy old GoldenEye from '97, which is good, because when you're making a remaster, you're not supposed to fundamentally change the game. But at the same time, it's also bad because GoldenEye is still GoldenEye, unfortunately. You might think it's stupid to complain about an unreleased port of a 23-year-old video game, and perhaps you're right, but at least in the context of a remaster, I think there are other things that need to be addressed aside from just graphics and frame rate. The controls are in a weird spot where they are improved, but they aren't quite fully revamped. The big difference here is that GoldenEye is now a dual thumbstick shooter, which we pretty much accepted at this point as the ideal way to play FPS games. And it's nice. It's definitely better than the original, but it still feels like the old control scheme was grafted onto this contemporary setup. It doesn't feel amazing. You're not going to get Halo level accuracy with this game. Although it is an improvement, and combined with a solid frame rate, it makes the game much more enjoyable in the long run. But we're just warming up here. One thing that used to piss me off in the original is how you could only see your crosshairs if you held R to aim the gun, which stops you in place and prevents you from moving. Why wouldn't they fix something like that? Why wouldn't they just give you a reticle? I mean, in 1997 it was excusable because this game was groundbreaking in so many other ways, and in many respects it was the first of its kind. But by the time this remake was in development, Halo was already a very solid and established franchise, so it's not like there wasn't anything better to compare it to. But that's a very small issue compared to this other one. That's the pause animation. For those of you who don't know, Rare had the genius idea of playing this animation of Bond looking down at his super sexy spy watch whenever you pause the game. This wouldn't be so bad, except that while you're locked into this 1-second animation, enemies are still free to do whatever the hell they want, and that absolutely includes shooting you in the fucking face. You can get killed while you're in the pausing and unpausing animation. I don't give a goody goddamn what anybody says. That there is some old bullshit. You can't fucking punish people for pausing the game. That's the shit that bad NES games that show up on AVGN are made of. It's lunacy. And if they ever did finish this remaster, I would pray to God that they fixed that shit. Now, I know I've taken a very negative turn here on what is otherwise a very momentous occasion, but in spite of these annoying issues that haven't been solved, this remaster truly is a very legitimate way of playing the game. It's certainly preferable to the original in many respects. As far as I know, just about everything is intact. I haven't played the multiplayer, unfortunately, but I did some research and I know that at least the entire campaign is there. But otherwise, I'm happy. Because once again, we have the privilege of seeing something that was never officially released. And that's cool as shit. And I sincerely hope we get to see more. Otherwise, the James Bond names Bond. And I'm all out of gum.